So, Anita, if you want to, well, I guess I'll also just give a little bit of a technical briefing on the space. I'll be the technical host, and we are going to be doing a number of breakouts, so I will I'll run those. Yeah, if you want to start us off with the attunement, great.
That sounds great. Thank you. So I'm just going to invite all of us to take a moment to tune into the breath. So either closing your eyes or just having a gentle gaze at a point on the ground. And just having this moment be an opportunity to tune into ourselves, just to check in with what's bubbling and what's alive in our hearts, in our minds, and in our bodies. So some of you were coming from the trauma workshop just before this. And just inviting in that self-awareness, that self-compassion for the trauma and the healing that we each have to do, that is being asked of each of us, whether it be personally, interpersonally, in our communities, at a village level, and also at a larger collective global level, as we face so many challenges looking out at our world, at our planet home, and all of the destruction and all of the loss. So just tuning in for a moment to all of this. And then with this next breath, coming into inviting in what nourishes us, what supports us, and what guides us. And for me, I start in my garden. I start here on the land where I live, the place that I call home, which is unceded Anishinaabe, Algonquin, Omamawinini territory. And I start from this place because I want to acknowledge and honor the caretakers, the land and the water protectors who came before me, those who are still doing everything that they can to protect this territory, and to honor and respect my teachers. And so just in this moment of silence, I invite all of you in your hearts to silently acknowledge the places that nourish you and support you, and the people that came before you, and your teachers. So just taking 3 gentle and full breaths in this moment. Especially for those of us who came out of the trauma workshop, and this applies to all of us, that just letting this be an opportunity to slow down, to really land in the body and be here, and to arrive here in this moment together in this group. And as you're ready, slowly opening your eyes and bringing your attention back to this group and to this circle. Thank you for being here, everyone. So our time will be focusing this evening, Kayla and myself, on an exploration of deep adaptation and what that means to us, how that touches us, and our own relationships with trauma, especially in relation to the global ecological crises that we're facing. And so just to give you a rough sense of the structure for our evening, we are going to start with some informal sharing through the chat box, and Kayla is going to lead us in that in a moment. So after that sharing, we're going to do 2 or 3 rounds of breakout groups with some discussion, some sharing on these topics. So basically, I think this time for me is really about standing on the edge, standing on the edge and looking down into this abyss in front of us and being willing to take a deep dive. And so it's about, part of it is about courage, and part of it is about showing up fully as ourselves and also showing up to be present for one another. Kayla, would you like to start us on the first informal chat poll question?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Benita. Thanks for that
Thanks, Kayla.
opening too. And if folks want to include in the chat, even now, you could put where you are, what territories you're in, where you are in North America. I think we are all in North America. If you're not, of course, that is welcome. I think because we're doing a virtual version of the summit, there actually is the ability to have people attend from outside of that region. But part of this context we want to set, carrying over from the trauma space, is to explore deep adaptation. But as we get into that, I wanted to get a sense of how familiar people are with deep adaptation. So you could give the the hand raising of at the top is I'm familiar with it. I've read up on it, and then at the bottom is maybe just heard about it yesterday. So if everyone could signal, or you could put it in the chat high, medium, low. Okay. All right. So all right. So it sounds like it's at least good to cover a little bit around it. And I'm not going to be providing a definitive history. And since the majority of this time that we're going to have together will be in breakouts, I just want to contextualize that there was a paper written by Jem Bendel of the title Deep Adaptation. And the context for it is an assessment of an understanding of the impacts of climate change and the catastrophic implications of the impacts of climate change. And it's one of many papers that are written in that context by climate scientists and people who are share those concerns. And then the whole movement of deep adaptation growing from that includes the Deep Adaptation Forum, positive deep adaptation. So it's a combination of a theory or a culture that's kind of grown around it. So I just wanted to give that framing. There are probably others who would could add more to that. So I speak not as an expert, but just as someone who's passionate about this topic, and I see it as really importantly connected to the work around trauma. Part of it is an attunement to understanding trauma of the past, because we actually have past, way deep past climate trauma, but also just the context of trauma from the past, trauma of the present, and then the potentials of trauma in the future, which is part of what deep adaptation really is about. And so the other layer and lens to really be holding this in for us is the context of permaculture, and as permaculturists, how do we hold that? How do we approach that in that way? Yeah. Maybe you want to move to the next one.
Mm-hmm. And so the next question that we would like to ask you, just as we're kind of getting our feet wet here, is so in the chat box, I'll ask you all this, and then also put this in the chat box and ask you to share in the chat box as well. So how do you feel about climate change and the potentials for ecological, social, and financial collapse? And if you can try and keep it to, let's say, 5 to 7 words max. I know it's a big topic. You could write a lot about it, and just to kind of try and distill your ideas into some key nuggets. So how do you feel about climate change and the potentials for ecological, social, and financial collapse in a maximum of 5 to 7 words in the chat box, please?
Just to add to that, you can go with the sense of the feeling in your body around even just hearing that phrase or reading it, or whatever's coming up.
Mm-hmm. And I think so, as folks are thinking about that question and starting to type in the chat box and sharing your own reflections, for me, part of the reason that it's important to me to start from this place of feeling. So, Joshua, you had asked me earlier about my book, and I will share just very briefly about it. So, I just self published a book called Embers of Hope: Embracing Life in an Age of Ecological Destruction and Climate Chaos. And part of the theme in this book, one of the important themes, is learning, practicing, holding both our despair as well as our hope. And for me, I think and we were talking about this in the plenary earlier today. For me, it's really about learning to, and having the courage to face the pain, the destruction, the catastrophes that perhaps are around us or are coming, and at the same time to find the strength and the courage to keep creating and seeding possible solutions. And so for me, this both and approach in feeling, I think it's so healthy and so natural to feel. And so I'm looking in the chat box right now. So to feel grief and anger and sadness for me is so natural. It's so human to be feeling these things when we're looking at the state of the world. And at the same time, I've really found in this work that it is so essential for me to cultivate hope, because that is what fuels me and allows me to keep going in this work. Because if I completely surrendered if I allowed myself to completely fall into and stay into my pit of despair for the rest of my life, I wouldn't be here with you in this moment. And I think a lot of us might stop the work that we're doing. And so for me, hope isn't about, for me, the grief and the anger and the sadness and the urgency and the panic and all of those feelings serve a very, very important function and purpose. And to me, they're like the yin and the yang of this work, the despair and the hope, the facing the facing the reality of crisis as well as seeding possibility. And so I'm just looking in the chat box over here. Is there anything, Kayla, in the chat box that jumped out for you that you would like to address?
Well,
So I'm seeing terrified and deeply sad. Yeah. Doom, cynical and hopeful.
Enormous responsibility.
Yeah.
Unprecedented opportunity.
Exactly. Yep. I think it's both. And it goes back again to that both and. It's, opportunity and responsibility. And so for me, it's so much about holding both of these and balancing both of these together. So the next question that we would like to pose to you is, how are you taking action on the climate crisis? So again, in the chat box, just in about 5 to 7 words, just sharing, how are you taking action on the climate crisis? And so as you're reflecting and as you're typing, I'll share for a moment. So when I was working on this book, the title came to me, Embers of Hope. It wasn't that I necessarily chose to focus on hope. And a friend and colleague, when she first saw the title of the book, she said something like she was a little skeptical that the book was going to be a little bit too light and a little bit too fluffy and airy-fairy and woo-woo and not grounded. And I think once she read the book, what she appreciated and where we're wanting to take us in our discussion, in our reflection this evening, is to move from this place of, to to practice and develop our capacities in being present with the difficult emotions, which includes the trauma, which includes the trauma of facing all that is dying and all that is being lost in the world now, and as well taking that and moving forward with that and taking action. And so for me, I really want to emphasize that it's not just about hope that is based on faith and wishful thinking. For me, it's really about hope and engaged action. And so I'm seeing some of the words that are popping up here in the chat box. And I'm also really appreciating that in the chat box right now, there's a combination of actions that are land-based. So I saw something about forest restoration, and I'm also seeing examples of work teaching NVC eco-villages, building community, and healing from dysfunction and trauma. So I think all of this, our internal work, our interior work, as well as our exterior work, I think all of these go hand in hand together in this journey now, which is at once personal and collective, I think. Kayla, is there anything you'd like to add to that right now?
Been adding a couple things in the chat and seeing, what a lot of people are sharing, like the internal work and the outer work, the work at different scales, the work locally, the attunement to larger network patterns of potential, and in some ways a new culture, so growing regenerative culture. That's something I've been there as a movement. I really believe that there's like a movement of movements potential rising and emerging in this time that we can be in service to. Seeing a lot around awareness and learning more, people being more educated, scaling up.
And for those of you who were not at the previous workshop, I think it was Monica that said this a couple of times, that we have the knowledge and we have the skills around trees and plants and the physical landscape and to design the ecological systems, or to work with the ecological systems around us. And we're not in this predicament, we're not in this crisis with the climate because of our lack of knowledge or because of our lack of solutions. It's because of people. It's because of our patterns as people. It's because of conflicts between people, which the previous group was pointing back to, that at the root of conflict often is trauma. And so it comes back to this piece, I think, that the other group started with, was that trauma can be at these various levels. It can be personal at the village level and also at the global level. And this is where our work is now, that in order to be most effective, taking our work out and trying to, and so I guess this is the topic that we're kind of chewing on tonight, is deep adaptation. So it's is it inevitable? Is it probable? Or is it possible? And we're not going to necessarily debate that, though I think that's just kind of the basket that we're exploring. So is collapse and extinction and climate catastrophe, are these inevitable? Whether they are inevitable, probable, or possible, how can we be most effective in addressing this in our lives? How can we show up? How can we show up in our communities? And how can we show up as a community to design and respond to all of these changes, some of them that we're seeing already, and some of them that, like the coronavirus and the pandemic that we're in right now, that maybe some of us really did not expect, and kind of that came out of left field for us. So I think right now we're going to move into our breakout groups and some sharing and discussion. Kayla, would you like to say a few words about what we're creating or what we're hoping to create in that format?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah, I can set us up for that. And for those who've been using Miro already or would like to use Miro, we're going to share a board link for that here in a moment as well. I guess I can share that link to you now. Well, the main thing is that we don't want the tools or the technology to get in the way of the experience, right? And that's kind of like one of the pattern level things for us to do as we make a shift towards living systems design and living systems technologies, right? The technology is like a technique. It should be an extension of our capacity. If it gets in the way, we can drop it and use other techniques and other available resources. So maybe even within a breakout, there's someone who can take the lead on writing on Post-it notes and doing that. But we have 3 breakouts, and there's a section on the board for each breakout. We're going to post the breakout also in the chat. And we're going to come back between the breakouts and have some sharing back to so we're going to use the whole group subgroup pattern. For those who are familiar with the GroupWorks pattern language, I'll share that as a resource if folks don't already see it. There's also the yes and, which I've been hearing, both and or yes and. So these pattern solutions as permaculture tools. But basically using whole group and subgroup. We're not a huge group, so we'll just have a couple breakouts, but we'll get the chance to do that. And one of the things in the Miro space is that the cursors of everybody moving around can be a little dizzying. So there's a spot to hide the collaborators' cursors right next to your face at the top of the board there, or your face or your icon at the top. So it's right on the center of the board. But anyway, before I see that a number of people are on there, that's why I started to mention it. So we're going to enter the first question into the chat. And then if folks are, we can just sort of, maybe if you want to read that aloud, Juanita, we can start to set up the breakouts.
So the topic for the first round of breakouts is going to be, how do you feel about the implications of deep adaptation? So whether that be inevitable, probable, or possible catastrophe, extinction, and or collapse. And how do you want to feel about it? So how do you feel about the implications of deep adaptation, and how do you want to feel about it? So just before we go into the breakout groups, one thing that I do want to invite all of you to do, all of us to do, when we're in the breakouts, especially with this first question, is to try and put your attention on your body as you're speaking and as you're listening. So in our working group, after the plenary discussion, we were chatting amongst ourselves and just talking about, Shmuel was sharing about how he and his community have been practicing and learning how to just soften the nervous system and slow down the stress response in our bodies. And so I just really want to encourage all of us, as we're especially in this first sharing about how we're feeling about deep adaptation and how we want to be sharing, just to also keep some attention on the body, on physical sensations in the body as you're speaking and as you're listening. And I believe, did you also want to say, Kayla, if folks, while they're in the breakouts, I think we're going to give people about 10 minutes in each breakout round. And if they would like if they want to flag one of us, one of the facilitators, they can do that.
Right. So yeah, so you can request for the host to come to the room. So if you need a hand there, and also if you want to leave the room to come back to the main room, one or both of us will be there in the main room anyway. If you prefer to come back, so you can come back at any time without leaving the whole session. So you can always do that. And yeah, so those are functions there. And I don't want to assume that people have a lot of experience with Zoom. So when the breakout starts, you will be, I believe I will be able to send you right into the room. If not, there will be a little dialog box that says click to join the room. And then after you've joined the room, the same button that would be the end or the leaving the meeting will give you an opportunity to leave the breakout and do that if you want to. But otherwise, when the end of the session, the end of the breakout happens, you get a prompt. I'm going to send you a message too when you have like 3 minutes left, and then you're still going to get another 1 minute warning. So you can just stay there for that last minute. Many of you probably had this experience in the breakouts before, but just wanting to make sure we cover that. And also want to re-emphasize there what Benita was just sharing, tying in the work from the trauma aspect, really being in our bodies around this and not getting too much in the head. One of the things around all this knowledge or all this scientific study and the aspects of that around deep adaptation, but really, how are we with it? How are we holding it? How can we hold ourselves and each other in a supportive way to be able to, be witnessed and also, integrate that with our breath and, the age. There's an embodiment component to this cultural transformation that we're bringing. So sharing that as well.
Does anyone have any questions of clarification before we go into the first breakout? Okay. So Kayla, you're going to set that up?
Yep. And so we are ready.
So just to repeat that back, so the theme for the first round of breakout discussion and sharing is, how do you feel about the implications of deep adaptation, and how do you want to feel about it?
All right. Welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. And so welcoming back from the breakout. So what we're going to do now, as a chance to hear back from folks, we're going to take a little time to hear from a few people, and it'd be great to hear from folks who are new to this session. Maybe they weren't in the first session, or people who don't always share, aren't always as vocal. Always like to invite that space for the people who share. And then for everyone also, though, feel free to share in the chat some of what came up in the breakout. But there's definitely room for some verbal shares. You can raise your hand with the software or with your hand. Either way. So usually people are a little slow to share. I know I see a lot on the board though too. So don't be shy. Someone be the first one.
Rachel, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Well, hello, I'm Rachel Velasquez from Houston, Texas. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for opening the space for me to speak right now. I just had a really good session with some ladies that I just met. Basically, what I got from all of this and what I'm just feeling right now is that I know there's a lot of fear going forward. There's a lot of fear. Change is always difficult for humans. And like I was telling the ladies in the breakout session, is that what I have observed about human nature is that we don't like change, we fear it, and we won't change unless there is impending disaster or that it's already happening, which is the case that we're in right now, or just the end is near. And so I feel that now that we're in the situation that we're in, we see that, it finally caught up to us, that we realize, we really need to make some changes, and we're starting to come to terms with that fact. And a lot of a trauma is being stirred up by that, and it's coming to the surface, and we're having to come up with new methodologies and new ways of, connecting with each other and healing this trauma. And it's led me into my own personal healing journey. And hopefully from that space of being able to work on some of my own personal traumas, that I'll be able to help others to go down that same path. And with the actual physical permaculture training that will be able to guide people out of this hole that we're in. And so how I want to feel, despite the feelings of fear and, you know, all this confusion and craziness, how I want to feel and how I'm teaching myself how to feel, and how I'm beginning to feel now that I know that there's many other people going through the same thing and leading the change, is that hopeful. Yes, I want to feel hopeful. I want to feel empowered, that I am able to join with other like-minded people and help to, you know, either ease the transition or rebuild after the catastrophe hits, or something, just to be a positive influence in the world. So yes, thank you for letting me share.
Joshua, thank you, Rachel, for sharing. Joshua, were you wanting to share? Or were you?
I was just acknowledging Rachel.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you, Rachel.
I noticed earlier, Anita, you've got your hand up? You can unmute. There you go.
Yeah, it was just because of something Rachel said about rebuilding in response to the catastrophe. What I was saying in my group is, I said, I'm experiencing it now. It's already been going on. I mean, I was wiped out in the crash in 2008, and everything started changing. And with this, it's gotten more intense. And so to me, it isn't a matter of waiting for the catastrophe. It's just actually being aware of all the kinds of changes that are going on, and meeting those with intention to redesign and live in a different way and establish different relationships and so on.
Thank you, Anita. So before we move into the next breakout, I just want to invite us to move our bodies, just to kind of wiggle a little, stretch, because I think taking this time to dive into how we're feeling about catastrophe and collapse and extinction is really, it's intense mentally, it's intense emotionally, it's intense on the body, physically. So just take a moment just to let some of that tension move through you. I think you're all on mute. I'm not. So if you want to just take a deep breath and just let out a big sigh or a big sound. So take a deep breath and let out a big sigh or a big sound to just let out any tension that might still be there. And one more breath, and just any other sounds and tension that's needing to come through. Just taking a big sigh, letting any sound out. Okay, so thank you everyone for participating in that first breakout. And we're now going to move into our second round of breakout. So let's see. So our second round of breakout, we are focusing on, so what are you doing now? What are you doing now to address catastrophe, extinction, collapse? What are you doing now? So that's the theme of our next breakout. And I think Kale is going to start getting us set up for that.
Yeah, so we'll be sending you into a different, very different breakout group. And I think there's a lot of facilitators here, so I'm sure that people are really, making a lot of space for each other to share. And then with the combination with the mirror board and everything, just want to, of course, emphasize that in the spirit of the World Cafe style of if everyone is a host and a facilitator for each other, then it's a great way for us to do this kind of collective sensing. And it feels really, I can feel it in the group listening, so appreciate that. Just want to name that. And so we'll do, again, it'll be a 10-minute breakout, and there's the center column on the mural space. Awesome. Any questions before we open it up?
Anita?
Kayla, you keep mentioning the Miro board, but I have no idea where it is or what it is. I don't know if everybody else has access and I don't, or whether it's variable or what.
I will put the link again right now into the chat, and hopefully you'll be able to access that.
But wouldn't that just take me somewhere else?
It will, you'll have to kind of toggle back and forth between
Yeah,
those.
okay.
So you
Yeah.
don't need to use it. It's not necessary. It's
Okay.
just an add-on.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
And you might want to just let someone take notes for you. I took some notes. I took notes for you, Anita, and I put them in there.
Oh, okay.
While
Well, somebody should take notes for me.
while
Yeah.
you were talking, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
folks are-
that's a good example of what could happen, is that someone may be willing to be a Miro scribe and the other people don't even necessarily need to look at it. Or if everyone agreed and wanted to, someone could screen share inside the breakout and show the Miro board while people are talking about it. We just don't want to overcomplicate with the technology, and that's why we almost didn't use the Miro board for the session, but we decided to include it as another dimension of engagement. So without further ado on that, it's just more to say, like, you're not losing out on anything or missing out to not see that. And
you'll have access to it afterwards as well, too. It will still be open. So after you finish this call this evening or tomorrow, you're welcome to go back onto the Miro board and check out the notes that were there. And Kayla, may I just suggest that for this breakout that we take 7 minutes, just because we're getting to 8:20, it's 8:29 now. We already did start with a question on what people are doing. So just to shorten it up a little bit.
sure.
Okay.
Yeah, we could do that. Do it
Thanks.
for 7 minutes. Great. So everyone, enjoy that. Okay. See you then. Bye. All right, welcome back.
So we would love to hear from a couple of you again, and also inviting folks to share any highlights in the chat box as well.
I would like to hear more from Patty, because we kind of got cut off there, but we were talking about her efforts in schooling and what she's doing there. So I'm just going to call her out real quick, because she kind of got cut off. I wanted to hear more. Oh, Patty, you're muted.
Oh, thank you. Okay, yeah. So thanks, Joshua. I want to continue that conversation too. Yeah. I have the Institute of Permaculture Education for Children, and I've been doing education, teaching children and their educators for 20 years, and somewhere or another, permaculture in all different kinds of learning environments, formal and informal, and all ages from toddler through university. So what I've been doing now is trying to find a way for action, trying to create sort of a curriculum that's really a movement about bringing well-being and happiness to your community. So it's like a movement of creating small groups that include children and adults, and bringing together your getting to know each other, understand each other, celebrate each other, and then find ways of bringing happiness and well-being, not only for yourself, but also for your community. So there's an understanding of like what makes each other happy, and then a development of understanding what makes community happy at the same time. So it's meeting people where they are, whether they're, really knowledgeable about permaculture, or they're just, interested in a candy bar, just meeting people where they're at and helping to provide a path for growth and connection. So I've been working on creating this movement, as well as writing a book about my vision for education. I think I better stop talking, because I'm doing a lot right now, and I don't want to take over the session, but there you go.
Thank you for sharing, Patty.
You're
Yes,
welcome.
thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to share? Maybe someone who hasn't spoken yet?
I could say something real quick.
Great.
Something that has come up multiple times in these smaller groups for me is like this inkling of actually like finding a sense of like relief and like empowerment through the collapse. Like I think there's a sense that like many of us have kind of been waiting for this, for like the collective and the mainstream to like actually have to confront what's going on. And that feels like what's happening right now. And so I think, I don't know, one of the things I'm doing, I think is just naturally happening because there's like a more collective awareness. And like, so I'm actually like able to have conversations that I wasn't able to have before. And like, because people are open to it. And I just wanted to speak to that because I think amidst all of the grief and the fear and the confusion of these times, there's also for some of us a sense of like actually like not feeling crazy anymore. I don't know if any of y'all can relate to that, but yeah, I just wanted to, okay, yeah, we're all here for, yeah, we understand each other.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So I think we're going to move into our last round of sharing and discussion. And this is just to dovetail on what you all have been talking about. And so this last question is, what do you want to be doing different? What do you want to be doing or doing differently? And what would help you move towards that? So what do you want to be doing, maybe doing differently? And what would help you move towards that? And as Kayla is starting to set us up with our breakout groups, so I've just put the question in the chat box, I just invite you to take this moment, this 30 seconds, just to breathe and let that question settle in. And just to let that question touch you, not just mentally, intellectually, but also emotionally and in an embodied way. So just taking this moment just to let that question land. What do you want to be doing differently, maybe? And what would help you move towards that?
Welcome back. Or welcome forward, I guess.
So we would love to invite one or two people to share again. Any other voices that haven't had an opportunity to speak in this group yet, or to speak to our larger group yet?
I could go.
Please.
I found it really heartwarming that in our breakout room we had really similar things that we would like to do differently, including slowing down and being outside more and moving our bodies more. And we felt that call from nature to just go out and hike and get strong. And also we're like, but I have all those projects that are so important and I want to create impact. And then how do we get there? And we thought, well, maybe if we're following that call more, maybe we just become more creative and more effective in the rest of our work. And then we connected with that fear that comes up when we imagine like, okay, I reverse priorities and I start with that, but what's going to happen with my work? And so we were imagining a challenge of like the go out and slow down, and where we can support each other with that fear.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That really resonates for me. Would there be another person that would like to share before we move into next steps and closing? Got a quiet, large group tonight. Quiet, sleepy, reflective, tranquil, embodied, perhaps.
Paula brought in the word spaciousness into our
Mhm.
conversation. So
I have something I'd like to share,
Please go ahead.
which wasn't saying this in my small group, but it kind of came to me afterwards, which is just, I would like to, and I cultivate this a little bit, come more from a place of gratitude and less from a place of expectation about all of the conveniences of modern life. And I have a friend who says, every time I turn on my car, I would like to be in a place of going like, wow, it actually works, instead of like, oh, I'm just racing off somewhere. And of course, all my energy servants will continue to serve me forever in the most convenient way possible. And I think it's just that there's an attitude there, that comes with this. It's sort of like all these things are not going to last. And I think a more of an attitude of gratitude for what it's doing for us in the moment, and less expectation.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Melanie.
All right, one more from Anita before we go into next steps.
So Melanie mentioned the car. So I just want to invite anybody who's well screened for COVID to come in my house for a period of time to experience not having a car, not having many things. Then there may be others of us who could share in that way also. But just to have that visitation into the simpler way of life.
Thank you, Anita. So I think we're moving into the last few minutes of our time. I'm going to pass it over to Kayla to help us talk about next steps.
Thanks, Benita. Yeah, and thanks everyone. I think that one of the themes that we're really holding in the working groups leading into the summit is that this is actually the beginning. So it's maybe some of you have seen that sign, the beginning is near, that sign, right? It's like, but like that's kind of the spirit here. So even that we'll be closing this session, we're really wanting to turn up the dial on our coherence and our collaboration, our capacity together through PINA and through all of our networks as well. So yeah, we'll name a couple of the things that are next step oriented. We're going to also post them on in the Miro board as another space. There are. I'll just copy this whole little chunk here, but basically there's the PINA regional hubs, the other sessions that we're hosting. We have a couple more days left of the summit as well. There's some links. I mentioned the GroupWorks earlier. So that GroupWorks deck, it's a really cool tool as permaculture teachers and permaculture designers and facilitators. It's a great resource, the GroupWorks deck. That link there is the Deep Adaptation forum. If you want to dive more into Deep Adaptation as the whole scenario, the larger picture of that. Also, there's a day of action coming up, September 19th, which is it's really the 19th to the 21st of September. But there's going to be the Day of Sustainable Communities. We're also inviting that to be a permaculture action day or a mutual aid action day. And that's one of the, you'll hear more about that, but that's one of the things that's coming up, and there's a link there to learn more about that or post events. I wanted to invite, and so there's a link to the Miro board there, and I did want to invite Benita to share more as well.
Thanks, Kayla. And so the last thing that I just wanted to put out there about my book, Embers of Hope. So we were talking in the plenary earlier today about privilege. And one of the things that was really important to me in self-publishing this book was to make copies of it available to low-income activists, so to Indigenous activists, Black activists, other POC activists, just activists that are doing really good work in their communities and couldn't afford to buy this book otherwise, or have other places that are more of a priority to invest their resources right now. So there's a crowdfunding campaign to provide free books to low-income activists. And also, I would please ask you to, if you know people who you think would appreciate the book and could not afford it, to please, so basically on my website, the link is in the chat box. If you go, you can buy the book on the website. You can also go to, on the top menu bar, there's also buy and support the book. If you go to support the book, there's a link to the crowdfunding campaign if you would like to donate and contribute towards it. Or if you know someone who would appreciate the book, you can send the information to them to fill in a request for a free book, or you can actually fill in the request form on their behalf. So I would really love to see, I would love to see this book going into a lot of communities where, thanks Kayla. I would love to see this book getting out there into the world, because for me, it's really about, I don't know who it was said earlier, but that part of this is a path of growth. And for me, it's a path of growth for myself personally and for us as communities. And maybe just to really wrap up, what I think what I would like us to do is just invite us to all share one word right now. So one word for where you are in this very moment. So I'm going to invite us to unmute one at a time and just share that one word.
Could I please have 2 words?
Please have 2 words, and then
Yeah.
pass the, call out a next person, I think, as a way to move through. Or I guess, yeah, I think that'll work.
Okay, gratitude and empowerment. Thank you. Audrey.
Gratitude and belonging. I cheat as well. And pass it on to Jane.
Grateful. Joshua.
Unified. Ricky.
Community.
Melanie.
Supported. Joshua.
I don't get 2 words. Danny.
All the words that were already spoken. All those words. Jillian.
Reflective. Anita.
Tired.
That was one of my words too.
Elizabeth.
Positive. Patty.
Well, no one called my name, but I'm improving. I was going to say tired, but getting better, improving.
Jane?
I was just applauding.
Patty, could you unmute? I think you were trying to unmute.
Did you hear my word?
We didn't
No,
hear your word.
you guys didn't hear it. Sorry. Okay, that's why that happened. I said onward. And I called for Paula. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Maybe she's muted.
Do we have? Is Paula here?
I don't think we have Paula anymore.
I don't think
She's not
Paula's with
muted.
us right now. Okay.
So who hasn't been called on?
Jen and Kelda, I think.
Kelda? All right. Is Kelda here?
Yeah, Kelda's here, but she has to
Oh,
be
she
quiet.
can't.
Okay.
Gratitude, she said.
Oh,
Gratitude.
she wrote gratitude. Thank you.
And then Jen?
And Jen.
Jen.
Peaceful.
Nice.
Jane, did we already hear you? I might be getting tired too.
Yeah.
Did we miss anyone?
I said grateful.
Did we get Jillian?
Yeah, and if in case people didn't see the chat, if anybody hasn't shared their name and email, if they'd like to be added to the Trauma and Deep Adaptation Working Group list, then please throw it in there, and we'll make sure. I think we'll probably have our next week meeting 2 weeks from today, but that is going right into the Labor Day weekend, so that might not be good, but stay tuned.
And so just to clarify, this workshop is one of the offerings of the Trauma and Deep Adaptation Working Group. So please, if you would like to get involved and be part of this, then yes, please add your email there. And my word is also gratitude. Kayla?
Coherent. And I'll do the wordplay version. Coherent. So much gratitude. Really, it is the beginning. As the beginning, the end, the opening. Endings are beginnings. So hope to see you throughout the rest of the summit and going forward. So,
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.